Hello, I'm Dr. Charlotte Middleton and welcome to the third video in our nutrition series. I'm hoping you've seen our first two videos, part 1 and part 2 of Eat Fat, Get Healthy. If you haven't, please do go and have a look at those now. Today I'm going to be talking about sugar and most importantly the overconsumption of sugar and the impact that that's having on your health. Needless to say, it's not good. Now interestingly, sugar wasn't always a problem. A few centuries ago, it really was only the wealthy that could afford sugar. And in the early 19th century, Australians actually only consumed around about 3 teaspoons of sugar a day. Fast forward another century, we were up to 27 teaspoons of sugar a day. And fast forward another century to the present day, and we are now consuming, on average, over 40 teaspoons of sugar a day. Now each country has a slightly different way of extracting it. So in the United States, most of their sugar is made from corn and it turns into high fructose corn syrup, which you probably have heard a little bit about. In Europe, they get most of their sugar from beets, and in Australia, we get most of our sugar from sugarcane. Whatever the source, it all adds up to the same pile of stuff, half glucose and half fructose. Now what is important is to know the difference between the two, and there is quite a lot of difference. So the first is glucose. Now it is our main fuel supply. We need certain amounts of fuel, of glucose I should say, to keep going. Literally every cell in our body needs glucose to produce energy. So all carbohydrates such as grains, milk, fruit, nuts and legumes are all converted into glucose and supplied to our cells for energy. So as I said, we need some, just not too much, and I'll come to that a little bit more in a moment. Just to let you know, glucose is often also called dextrose on any food labelling. It's essentially the same simple sugar, and as I said, I'll come back to glucose in just a moment. Fructose, however, cannot be used by our bodies for energy. We are poorly adapted to it, and in excess, the liver actually converts it to stored energy, aka fat. Now, fructose plus glucose makes sucrose, or garden variety table sugar. And most of the sugar in all processed foods contain sucrose. And what it means is that we are getting awfully large doses of fructose that we never have got before. And herein lies the problem. So as I've said, never before have our bodies had to deal with such high levels of fructose, which a lot of people describe as a very toxic and addictive substance. And it's everywhere. And I'm not just talking about the typical lollies and ice creams and things. It's even in supposedly healthy foods such as flavoured yogurt, muesli bars, breakfast cereals, drinks, chips, and a myriad of sauces and condiments. Now, one of the problems with it is that it is just so addictive. And so our kids are now eating way too much of it and developing all sorts of illnesses that up until now have really been only adult diseases such as obesity, which is actually officially a disease in the United States now, type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. Now, what else can fructose do? Well, it overloads and damages your liver. So the effects of it have actually been likened to the effects of alcohol. So all this fructose that you're eating is shuttled to the only organ that can transport it, which is your liver. And this taxes and overloads your organ, leading to potential liver damage, reduced insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance, and a long-term condition known as non-alcoholic fatty liver. Second thing that fructose can do is that it causes weight gain by affecting your insulin and leptin signaling. Now what that means is that actually when we ingest fructose, it doesn't turn on insulin like glucose does. And what that actually does is it fails to suppress ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, and then that in turn fails to stimulate leptin, which is the hormone that tells you that you are full and to stop eating. So obviously this just causes you to eat more and more and to gain more weight. Now, although fructose doesn't acutely increase your insulin levels, what we are now knowing is that chronic exposure to fructose seems to indirectly cause long-term high levels of insulin and obesity through other mechanisms. Because when insulin levels are high, the body finds fat easier to store and harder to burn. Okay, and I'm going to come back to insulin in a moment. What fructose also does in excess is it causes an overall metabolic dysfunction. So it causes what we know now as metabolic syndrome. And this includes insulin resistance, weight gain, particularly around the abdomen, decreased HDL cholesterol, which is the good cholesterol, and increased LDL, which is the bad cholesterol, elevated blood sugars, elevated triglycerides, and high blood pressure. And then this in turn can lead to chronic illnesses such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Lastly, fructose also increases your uric acid levels, and these are known to be a risk factor for heart and kidney disease. And it also, as I said, is an addictive substance. It actually stimulates the addictive part of your brain that causes habituation and dependence, much in the same way that alcohol does. Fructose has also been found to feed cancer cells and to increase their proliferation, promoting cell division and speeding their growth. And another growing body of research has also found a powerful connection between a high fructose diet and an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, pretty much in the same pathway that causes type 2 diabetes. So all in all, it is not a good thing, and we are consuming way too much of it. Now remember, I spoke about glucose just a moment ago, and as I mentioned, glucose is needed, but if too much of it is taken in, it can be just as bad. So when we ingest glucose, it actually causes an acute spike in your insulin levels. Now, insulin is responsible for moving glucose from your blood into the cells so that they can either burn it or store it as fat. So it goes without saying that too much glucose equals too much insulin, and then you will be putting on too much fat, and particularly, as I said, around the abdominal area. What also can happen over time is that we develop an insulin resistance. Now, this is where the tissues become less sensitive to insulin, just don't respond, so they're not taking that glucose in as they should. The pancreas responds to this by further increasing your insulin levels. And what research shows us is that obesity is largely a result of too high insulin levels over time. Interestingly, stress is one of the other major reasons for weight gain, but I need a whole nother video to talk about that. Now, over time, the pancreas just can't keep up with all this insulin that's required. And so what happens eventually is that your insulin levels actually drop. And this is where you will develop conditions such as pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So how much is recommended for a daily intake? Well, Dr. Robert Lustig, who is a professor of clinical pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology in the University of California and a pioneer in decoding sugar metabolism, says that your body can safely metabolize 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. Now, considering Americans or Australians are consuming over 3 times that amount, the majority of excess sugar is being metabolized into fat, as I've already mentioned. He actually likened sugar to controlled drugs. Cocaine and heroin are deadly because they are addictive and toxic, and so is sugar, he says. We need to wean ourselves off. We need to de-sweeten our lives, and we need to make sugar a treat, not a diet staple. A lot to be said in that statement. How does this equate to everyday life? Well, as I've already mentioned, that sugar in its natural form is not inherently bad for you as long as it is consumed in moderation. Now, this pretty much means, though, getting rid of all sources of fructose, particularly processed foods and beverages like fruit juices or soft drinks. Ideally, what you should be aiming for is that 80 to 90% of your foods are from whole, nutritious foods, and that only 10 to 20% are from processed foods. What you also need to remember, though, is that we need to limit how much refined carbohydrates we have in our diet. So I'm talking muffins, cereals, bagels, things like that. Because refined grains. Because what they actually do is they break down to sugar in your body, and this in turn increases your insulin levels, as I've already mentioned. So we've spoken about the 6 teaspoons a day of sugar. Now, there is some controversy as to whether or not this should include fruit, which is pretty much all fructose. However, what people say is that the enzymes and fibre in the fruit help to actually slow down that sugar in our system, and it doesn't cause the sugar spikes that other fructose food does. However, having said that, if you are looking to eat fruit, I do recommend no more than 1 to 2 pieces of fruit a day, and apples, pears and berries are probably your best choices over the high sugar fruits such as mango or pineapple. When buying food products, look on the back, look at food labels. What you're looking for is to make sure that the sugar is only around about 3 to 6 grams per 100 grams, okay? Dairy, you can actually have that up until 8 because half of it is actually lactose, which is okay. Now liquids, I have to say, any sugar is bad. You think about it, a 350ml tin or can, even a few grams of sugar is going to be too much. So that's definitely a sometimes treat. Finally, please don't swap sugar for things like aspartame or sucralose. They come with a whole nother set of health problems that are in fact worse than the overconsumption of sugar. Agave is also not healthy. It's 90% of fructose and highly processed. While honey is half fructose, there are a load of other health benefits that go with honey. So certainly small amounts of honey will do you benefit, particularly the pure raw honey. And if you're looking for a good replacement, then I would go with stevia. Stevia is found in most supermarkets, has a slightly bitter taste for some, but it certainly is one of the best replacements if you are after some sort of sugar replacement. Fantastic film that I can't recommend enough that I just watched recently is That Sugar Film by Damon Gameau. It documents the effects of eating supposedly healthy foods that contain high amounts of sugar. It's a real eye-opener and I can't recommend it highly enough. Thanks so much for watching this video today. I hope I've been able to convince you that we all need to reduce our sugar intake, particularly our fructose intake. As I said, if you haven't watched part 1 and part 2 of this nutrition series on Eat Fat, Get Healthy, please do so. And watch out for my next video where I put it all together and talk about what is a really great sort of daily healthy meal plan. Talk to you then. Bye for now.